So welcome to part 3 of the All Confessions webinar series, and this one is covering feedback and help. So when we look at all confessions, and there are over 720 confessions now, and look at the root cause analysis, user training, whilst it's not the highest issue, is certainly a major issue in terms of users following the applications in the way that are expected. And I think we all have examples where users do things which are completely unexpected, which often screws up data and it certainly isn't using the application the way we expected. So if we think about user training in terms of the implementation methodology, so the whole idea that we do the analyze phase, we capture requirements, we map processes, we then write user stories, we then obviously build the application, test it. Ideally, we document it, we do some impact analysis to make sure that whatever we're about to release is not going to break anything that already exists. We load data if we need to, we certainly then deploy and release. And then training and feedback seems to be the last box at the end here, which is the thing we do after we've deployed. So you want to train our end users. And whilst I understand that's what training is, I started the conversation by saying this is about user adoption. So training starts there, but actually user adoption starts at the very beginning. My view is that user adoption starts by building the applications that your end users really need, not what they thought they wanted. And it's a lot easier to get them to use it in the way that they ought to be using it if you're building the application that supports how they are meant to be working. So therefore, this piece here, capturing requirements, mapping processes to validate the requirements and identify the new requirements, and then writing really tight user stories, that's where you can have the biggest difference in terms of your user adoption. I'm not going to spend any time on that. In the training that we've created at train.elements.cloud, we have a whole piece of training material around analyze, which we'll get into detail so you can understand how to do that. Also, in terms of the build phase, when you start documenting what you've configured, some of that and some of the process maps can be used as training material. So don't think of the documentation phase as, oh, this is just for the admins, this is just for the developers. If you think of it with the audience also being end users, you get a double whammy there. Yes, you've documented your org, but also you can use that documentation as help. And the impact analysis, again, making sure that what you're about to build is not going to break something else, which is then killing user adoption in another area and destroying your users' trust and confidence. And finally, obviously, there is then the how do we provide that training, how do we get that feedback from end users inside the application. And then the last point at the top here is about performance and metrics. We all act as we're measured, and therefore making sure that we understand we are measuring people in the right way will drive the right behaviors. So this is not just about are they using the application and logging in regularly. It could be, is the data quality at the right level? And then if we think at almost a higher level, are they actually delivering the end-to-end process in a way that was expected? And that goes back to our processes. So if we have a clear understanding about our process, we then can understand which metrics we really need. And I wrote an article about leading versus lagging metrics. A lagging metric is one where if I think about, say, Disney World, the number of people who came in last week is a lagging metric. I can do nothing about that. That's a metric. They turned up last week, but a leading metric might be the number of people who are going to a particular ride, and if that ride hasn't got very many people on it, maybe I can start to drive some marketing that pushes more people to that ride, or give some sort of incentive. So if I can pick some metrics that are earlier in the cycle, earlier in the process, then I can start to drive behavior rather than simply tracking what happened. So there's a whole topic on that in the help as well, so I don't propose to spend time on that. What I want to spend time on is, first of all, just thinking about what a process looks like if you haven't seen one before, and then think about how we capture feedback and embed that in terms of Salesforce. So I'm not suggesting we're mapping the whole operation, but very quickly you could draw a diagram like this. This is, say, for the a request coming in, an unhappy customer with a support request, and you can start to just track through the different ways that a request might flow through, and then some of these steps may be supported by Salesforce. So we can start to see where the help's valid. We can start to use this diagram maybe as the context so that an end user understands where they are inside the application. So this diagram has multiple uses. One, it's making sure that we are getting the right application built because we really understand what the end user's process is. And secondly, we can use this as pop-up training. So I want to go through 6 different things. First of all, how do I embed that process diagram inside a page, inside a Lightning page or a Classic page? Secondly, how do I use the utility bar? In Lightning, maybe some of you haven't found the utility bar. Fantastic resource which you can program. So how do I put a diagram in the utility bar? How do I basically extend the Salesforce help icon to pop up a diagram? So that's diagrammatic help, using those process diagrams. Then the next thing is obviously using the Salesforce help text, just the plain help text that exists for free inside Salesforce. How do I work out which of the fields that are most important to add this to? How do I add it to it quickly? Then you may have training material, training collateral out there, videos, PDFs, Word documents, whatever they are. How do I make sure that they are in the end user space, exactly where they need? So we call this point of need help. And finally, some thoughts about feedback and metrics. So I want to, sorry, just quick questions come in. So a quick question about licensing. For numbers 1, 2, 3, and 5, you'll need to use the Elements. You need at least one editor and the Salesforce connection to build the metadata dictionary, and then you'll need an end user license. And that end user license is less than $1 a month. It's $10 per year per user for the help. So you'll need at least one editor, $750, at least one Salesforce connection license, which is based on your number of production orgs, which is $1,000, and then $10 per year for the. So all of those were per year. $750 per year, $1,000 per year, then $10 per year for the end user license. If you're a non-profit, there's a 50% discount. So for some of you who've never seen this, none of that will make sense. So let's show you how this thing looks, and we'll make sense of that. So here I am in a Lightning page. It could equally well be a Classic page. So let's look at some of those things that I talked about. The first is looking at a process diagram inside a page. So you can see I've created a new tab here. This is in Lightning, but in Classic it would be a new section. If I click on that section there, I now have a process diagram, and any process diagram that I've drawn can pop up in this page. Excuse me. So this one happens to be a boxes and lines. It's a live diagram. All the links work, drill downs work, and so on. So very easy to navigate around for the end user. I could scroll in and out. I can click on the drill downs. So an end user can then start to understand exactly where they are in the context of what they're trying to do, adding data. So that's very quick to do. I'll show you how we do that in a moment. Actually, no, I'll show you how to do that right now. Where are we? Here's a record page, and all I've done is I've dropped in a Lightning component into this diagram, and then on the right-hand side, I have typed in the diagram ID. So every process diagram in the URL has a unique ID. Type that ID in, say what height you want, and that's how you paste that diagram in. So you can pop that lightning component in a new tab at the bottom of a section in the right-hand column, however you want to do it. But again, you set the height of it and you decide which diagram, and it will always put the published version in. You may have draft versions that are work in progress, but it will always display the published version. Okay, so that's the first place that you can put a process diagram. The second is this utility bar here. So if you click on the utility bar, there's a pop-up, and I can put any diagram. That happens to just be a very simple diagram, but it could have images, it could have text, it could have whatever you want in there. And again, how would I set that up? A little bit more complicated. You've got to go into the app manager, Lightning App Manager, and then hit the utility bar, utility items. You add a new utility item, you select our diagram utility bar item, set the height, set the width, and again, type in the diagram ID. And that enables us to display any diagram there in the utility bar. And as I said, you can draw images, text, whatever you want in terms of those in a diagram. So that help text doesn't have to look like a process diagram. It could look like just plain help text. The other cool thing is that utility bar, the way the utility bar works is it's context sensitive, so it knows which object I'm on, so it will pop the correct diagram. And the third place that you can put a diagram, you can see here that there's a Salesforce help text, but some of these help icons have gone purple, and that's because we've of the Elements Chrome extension, and that's where the end user license again is required. Pop that, and you can now see, look, there is a process diagram as a pop-up in this case, rather than inside a tab or inside a utility bar. Same diagram in this case. As you see, everything's live. You can scroll in or out. So how would I set that up? Well, if we go to our, you would build, first of all, you would need to have the Elements metadata dictionary, or the org model as we call it. So that synchronizes all of your metadata from Salesforce, pulls it all in. It pulls all the objects in. In this case, this is a project object. Let's go down there. We were looking at the budget field. There's the budget field. If I look at the documentation tab, I can link to documentation, but I can link to a process diagram. So there's a link to a process diagram, and I said that I wanted it shown as help. So one click, I've linked the process diagram to this field. One click, it pops up. I can see I've got a second one here, deliver implementation service, completely different diagram. Let's show that as help in Lightning. If I go back to my Lightning page, this one here, click there. I didn't hit refresh. There is that new process diagram. And you can see this one's got images in. It's got, so again, any diagram that you want to pop up doesn't have to be a process diagram. It is any diagram using our diagram editor. And you can see here that people can rate whether this is useful or not useful. And as an admin, you're starting to collect those statistics, which will start, so you can start to understand the behaviors. In fact, obviously we use elements inside our own Salesforce implementation. So we drink our own champagne. I had an email around yesterday from our admin saying, I've been looking at the help on the opportunity object, and only 42% of the help is being looked at. So he wanted to do a review of whether the help was useful. So again, starting to have a cycle of improvement of this help is really important. Starting to engage the end users and understand what help's being used, what isn't, is it helpful or not, so we can start to refine it. So I've looked at diagrams. So we've looked at diagrams inside a page, diagrams in the utility bar, diagrams in the pop-up help. That's obviously part of the paid product, but many people aren't even using the basic Salesforce help. So there is little grey icon there. This is all the free Salesforce help that already comes inside the product. And many people don't use it, maybe because it's too difficult to maintain, maybe it's because people don't understand which are the right fields to look at. So the next step, and I will show you how to maintain the next both the plain text and how to do pop-up help in just a moment. So I just want to show you this piece first, which is, yes, we can link to processes, but there's no reason why I couldn't link to existing documentation. So I've already got a YouTube video, or I've got a PDF, or a My Trailhead, or whatever it is. It's a URL. I can pop that either as in a pop-up app like this, or opening up a new tab. So if you already have existing training material, you don't need to go and create new training material, simply link it and deliver that inside Salesforce against either an object or against a field. So there is an idea of a document that's been written inside our application, which is a help document with embedded videos, embedded URL links. One other point, we're adding help, obviously, where there are existing help icons for Salesforce, but there are some fields that don't have help, such as the name of the object. So it'd be really helpful to be able to have, this is our naming standards for the way that you want me to name every new project or every new opportunity. You also don't normally get help at an object level. So this is help. This is the help for every object. This help is specific to an object which has a change record type. So you can start to drive the help that is specific to a record type at an object level. So we've been thinking about the different ways that people need to provide help to their end users. So let's take a few moments just to look at how we create this help. Let me go back to my org model, and you can start to see for the help here, there's other documentation. So I could add a note. This one happens to be a note. Click on that note. There you can see the note. Let me just go and say, just put some numbers on the end of that so you can see, and I've updated it. You can see that it says I want it visible in both Classic and Lightning. I just go back to that page, click on that budget field, formatting budget and rules. There you are. See, we've already updated the help. So again, we're disconnecting all of this from the implementation cycle of Salesforce. So you can be a lot more responsive than rolling out a new change to Salesforce. This is where I would add a link. So that happens to be a URL link. There's the URL link. Click, I want that visible in Lightning. It's a URL. Do I want to open it up in a new window or in a pop-up window? So very, very quick to take your existing content and make it visible inside Salesforce. So this is inside our application, and customers say to me, that's great, Ian, but I'd prefer to do all this documentation inside setup. And the answer is that's not a problem. If you click on an icon, then we can open up the right panel. Just do a quick refresh on that. We can open up the right panel inside Salesforce in setup. So there we are. We're on the project objects. We're on the budget field. Everything I've just shown you is available inside setup. So I could edit the help text here. That's the Salesforce help text. I can now start adding documentation here and making it available as pop-up help, either as documents, URL links, or process diagrams. But there's one other place where this right-hand panel appears, which makes it very helpful for you providing help. So let me just go back to my page layout. So what I'm about to show you is purely for admins. This is not an end user view. This is an admin view for you maintaining the help. And let me just take you to Classic for a moment. And the reason we're going to Classic is that the Details tab here in Lightning is identical to the Classic page. So there you go, there's our page layout. Looks rather like a CVS receipt with all those fields. The question is, which of those fields are important? Which should I add help to? If I use that right panel, click Show, the Chrome extension will pop up the right panel, so I can click on any field now. And in the right panel, I can edit the Salesforce help text. So let's go to that budget field again. That's the one we remember. There's the help text. That's the Salesforce help text. And I can add documentation. I can also see which fields have got a high impact, maybe because they're used in validation rules. So I can start to focus my effort, take a page layout and say, okay, outline. Is that field important? No help text. It's low because it has no data in it. It's only used in page layouts. So maybe I don't need to be adding any help for that. So very quick to use the right panel inside a page layout so you can start to update the help. So there's a really good question actually just been asked here, which is all this documentation that I've been adding, where should I document it? Should I document it in my UAT sandbox, in my integration sandbox, in my dev one, or in production? The answer is actually it doesn't matter, because when you synchronize each org, you end up with a separate metadata dictionary. So you'd end up with a production one. If you sync to your sandbox, you'd also end up with a similar tree in your sandbox. If you add some documentation to an item in your sandbox that doesn't currently exist in production, as you deploy to production, that documentation will travel with it. So we actually manage all the documentation as it goes through your deployment pipeline. So the last thing I was going to talk about was, let's go back to Lightning for a moment. You can see that obviously the help works in Classic. The last thing I was going to talk about was all about metrics and feedback. So some of you who are paying attention will have spotted that the purple icon, if I click on the purple icon, there's also a feedback button. So for every place where you've added help, then end users can provide feedback. Even if you haven't added help, any help topics, so I don't think I've got any help topics. Oh, I have. Let's pick one where I haven't got. Let's pick a campaign. So I know I've created no help topics for a campaign, but I have got the end user help turned on. You can see here, I have a feedback button. So even if you haven't got any training material created, if you deploy this, immediately you've got a way of capturing feedback for every single object. And as you start adding help to fields and at object level, then that feedback button appears for fields as well. So we've got a way of capturing that feedback. And that feedback will end up in, if I go back to my org model, there's a tab there called feedback. So you can start to see the feedback and respond to it. We also post that feedback into a chatter feed as an alert, and there's another grid inside Elements where you can see all the feedback. So there are places where you can go to work out what feedback's being driven back from your end users, so you can close the loop really quickly. A critical thing I think about end user adoption is if a user has a problem, how quickly can you fix that? Can you add a help topic, post it, it's immediately visible, say to the end user, does this help? They rate it, and they suddenly get a positive reinforcement. If you're tied to the Salesforce dev cycle and your dev cycle is 3 months, the next time you can put any new training material out is 3 months' time. That is too slow. We need to be able to open up a page layout, maybe even just take an iPhone and do a video of filling out, uploading an attachment to a campaign, and then take that video, upload it to your YouTube channel, and then connect it. And instantly you've got help associated with how to fill out attachments. That's the sort of speed of response that we need. to drive that positive reinforcement. So what I've just gone through very quickly, and again, the recording will be available, is how to embed a diagram in a Lightning component or a Visualforce page, how to put it into a utility bar, how to pop it up as help, how to edit the plain text for Salesforce help, how to pop up documents and URLs, and then feedback and metrics. In the last few minutes, I just want to take a slightly different perspective, which is user adoption is often because users are confused. If you've got page layouts that look like CVS receipts, maybe you could remove some of those fields from page layouts. And I showed you that right panel where you could start to work your way down every single field and work out whether it's used or not and decide whether to remove it. Maybe that field is only used in one record type. So why are you adding it to every field, every page layout for every record type? So you can start to be a bit clever about the fields that you're using. And again, with that right panel and our metadata dictionary, which does all the analysis about where fields are used, you can have some confidence about removing fields from page layouts. The other thing is using some of the existing tools inside Salesforce. Can you use validation rules to make it easier for end users to put the right data into fields so you're getting good data quality? Can you use pop-up quick actions, something we use a lot inside our own implementation of Salesforce, so that as an end user, I'm not trying to work out where to find buttons. I know there's a list of quick actions that I can get to. I create a new opportunity, I add a product, I can extend a trial. All those things are quick actions on a quick action button inside Lightning. So to do the things which I've shown you, you'll need to install Elements and get the sync up and running. So we've pulled all your metadata, and then you need to install the Chrome extension. You can run a 14-day trial. Go to the App Exchange, type Catalyst, run the App Exchange from an external link. If you try and run the App Exchange inside Salesforce, a number of apps won't load properly. Ours seems to be one of those. So go to the App Exchange on an external link. We've also created a business case builder, and there's obviously a pricing page. More importantly, we've also created a bunch of training material. This one is called User Adoption that I've been going through, but we've also created training material around implementation methodologies, business analysis, org impact assessment and documentation, and org cleanup. All of these are areas where there isn't currently training inside Trailhead, so we've decided to produce this training instead. And obviously, those of you who come here because you've heard of All Confessions, you know the link, and there's the link there to the movie. If you've never heard of All Confessions, please take a look. It's quite therapeutic. You find that someone's org is worse than yours. If you've got some great stories, please add those. They are anonymous, and I said we're up to about 720 something at the moment. So that's our quick 30-minute webinar. I'll happy to take questions. I'll